Loving Community Land and Housing Coalition, Multnomah County Cohort 2021. Research meetings. Ancestral land acknowledgement. We gather together on holy living land, earth, which supports and sustains us. We acknowledge that this region is the ancestral and unceded territory of the original peoples of the Multnomah, Wasco, Clackamas, Calumet, Cowlitz, Willamette, Tumwater, and Cascadian bands of Chinookan peoples, the Tualatin Band of Kalapuya, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette River. They lived and thrived in a profound, complex, and interdependent relationship with the land and other beings long before white colonial settlement. We recognize we are here because of systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that was forced upon them. Today, we acknowledge the region's diverse, vibrant Native communities who are still connected to this land. Indigenous peoples, 70,000 strong, with more than 280 tribes with at least 18 unique languages, both local and distant. We extend our deepest gratitude to our siblings and elders, past and present, who have stewarded this land and who carry on tribal traditions for present and future generations. Let us take a moment of silence and reverence and gratitude. In tonight's meeting, we are learning about research meetings, and our objectives are as follows. You will locate research meetings within the sacred organizing spiral as part of sacred unveiling that leads to relationships and understanding so we can take action together. You will also be introduced to and deepen understanding of power mapping and research meetings through experiencing one. In our spiral of sacred organizing, we have talked about the power of sacred encounters and the listening that draws us out of ourselves and into something bigger, into our connection with humanity. Tonight, we are talking about sacred unveiling. The sacred unveiling that reveals where power lies to initiate change. And one of the ways for sacred unveilings is through research meetings. The purpose of research meetings is to develop relationships with power people and decision makers in our systems, to reveal where our collective power lies, to connect with their motivations, passions, hopes, dreams, needs, etc. Another reason is to learn power dynamics at play. Who has the power to make the change? Who can influence whom? And where the barriers are and where the pressures need to be applied. We don't go into research meetings thinking we know it all. We go in empty and come out full.
I want to tell you a story about a research meeting that we had a few years ago. And I want you to be listening to this story and pay attention and notice. How in the meeting did we develop relationship and uncover the self-interest of the power person? And how did we learn powerfully about the system? So do you see that picture down there of a few of us that are also, some of us are in that room? We had been doing a listening season with 11 Community and Salt and Light Lutheran Church. This is a pre-cohort listening season before the cohort, this cohort and the coalition existed. And we were listening to housing pressures on our community. And everyone in this box has housing pressures. Eric lived in rental apartments that were too expensive in Cully. LaVeta was potentially being forced out of the neighborhood she'd been working in and living in for years. I had bought a house I couldn't afford and was in a lot of debt. John had been finally able to buy a house later in life, but had a son who was facing houselessness. And right here is Luz Maribel Gomez, who had been a powerful leader in our community for over 25 years. And she had worked as a community organizer, a labor organizer, and around so many issues. And she had found herself basically couch surfing because she could no longer afford to live in the neighborhood she had invested so much in. And when we heard Luce's story, it moved our community deeply. And some people in the community rose up and said, you know, I've got land. I live in Cully. It's got a big swath of land. And somebody else rose up and said, you know, I just built a tiny home. What if we put the tiny home on that other person's land and there was housing and Luce could live there and she could be in the neighborhood because we needed her to stay in the neighborhood. She is like a powerhouse in our community. So this was not charity. This was about organizing. But simultaneously, when that happened, we had just come up with this great idea. Somebody else that lived in a tiny home in our communities was evicted because tiny homes on private property were a gray area in the policies of the city. And so we were like, this is not okay. Our love for Luce, our sense of justice, we were in a housing crisis. How could they possibly be evicting people from housing that they had when we were in the midst of a housing crisis? And so we started to do some power mapping, and we recognized that Chloe Udaly was the commissioner that oversaw the Housing Bureau at the time. And we had a relationship through one of our members with Marshall Runkle, who was the chief of staff of Chloe Udaly and had worked in the city for years. And so by making a phone call, I was able to get us a meeting, a research meeting with Marshall Runkle. And we prepped for that meeting. We were going in dumb, coming out smart, but with our hearts on the table around what was at stake. And so we prepped, and what we wanted to know was if we were in a housing crisis, how could people be evicted? And was there a way, because we knew Udaly had championed affordable housing, that's what she ran on. Was there a way to put a stay on the eviction of RVs and tiny homes on private property while the city legislated them? Because we were pretty sure they were working on that. But in the meantime, could there be a stay? So we were going in to understand the power dynamics at play and where we might need to put pressure. We showed up early. We got there before Marshall Runkle. So that's City Hall behind us. We got together, we prepared our questions. We got into the room, and again, he wasn't there yet. So I was leading the meeting. So I positioned myself where I wanted him to sit next to him. We had everybody around the table, and then Luce, who had the story, was going to sit right next to Marshall Runkle. We started the meeting on time, welcomed him into his own space. I said, thank you for this meeting. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then we have some questions for you. And one by one, we went around the table and shared in 30 seconds why we were there, what our housing story was, and why we cared so much about making sure people were not displaced during a housing crisis. We got around to Luce, and she shared her story. She then invited Marshall's story, and he shared that he comes from a Quaker background and that living in Portland all these years, that he believes that housing is a right of all people. So he started to connect with us. That's when we started to share the dynamic, the problem we were encountering, and ask the question, who has the power to put a stay on tiny homes, the eviction of tiny homes and RVs in our city? And in that moment, his eyes lit up. He said, we do? Chloe Udaly can unilaterally do that as the head of the Housing Bureau? We didn't know that going into that meeting. And thank you so much, because we've been looking for the solution to this problem. And I can't believe we didn't think about it before. And we said, well, will you do that? And he said, yes, I'll make a meeting with you daily. You can meet with her next week. We can talk about it. And then we said, well, can we announce this publicly with an assembly at Salt and Light and Loving Community? Will she come and have us make this ask in public? And he said yes. And so we thanked him for his time. We got the time on the books before we left the meeting. We left, we danced, and we started to plan an assembly where we could celebrate. We also evaluated the meeting, what worked and what was powerful. We're going to have the opportunity to experience a research meeting in a moment together. But I want you to reflect maybe in the chat box on those two questions, just to start getting percolating and learning together. How did we develop relationship and uncover the self-interest of the power person in the room? How did you notice us doing that in this story? And how did we learn powerfully? How did we learn powerfully? So let's see what's happening in the chat. Okay, so what did we do to develop relationship? And what did we do to learn powerfully? And you can unmute yourself if you want. Christine from St. Philip said, makes it personal, share a person's story. So that's right. We made it personal. We all shared our story. Lou shared her story. Your story invites their story, right? Your vulnerability invites their vulnerability. Your humanity invites their humanity. Excellent. Leading with your story, setting the precedent that it's not just about facts. That's right. We wanted to move him, and he clearly was moved. You developed relationship by your seating choices. Yes, Joan, that's right. We were very strategic. Did you also notice how we showed our power? We organized the space. We welcomed him into our meeting. We were clear about what we were doing. We began on time, ended on time, didn't waste his time. He wanted to meet with us again. We clearly had our stuff together. And yeah, how did we learn? How did we learn powerfully? It's a simple question, but an important one. Asking pointed questions. That's right. We didn't go in there saying, you know, Marshall, we know all about the city. We're super great. No, we were curious. We really wanted to know, and we listened carefully. That's right. And we asked the question, who has the power to make our request a reality? That's right. So as we are about to prep to go into some research meetings, and we'll tell you in a minute who those are with, I just want to share a little bit about what research meetings are and what they're not. They are led by your team, 3 to 8 people, and your agenda, not the decision maker. They are focused and concise, and they are intentional. They include a pre-meeting and an evaluation. They are not random. They are not about it. They're not individual, and they're not about showing off what we know. There is a chair. And so tonight we have we'll be broken into 2 different research meetings, and there will be a chair that directs the meeting. There is a team that has 2 roles. One is to cultivate relationship in that room by how we share our stories, inviting their story. And each person comes with a strategic question that the team has thought about together, and they ask that question during the meeting. We keep to a very tight flow. There's no wasted space and no time for decision makers to take control of the meeting for their purposes, because sometimes they will do that. So we can begin to think about what strategic questions we want to be asking in research meetings. And we've already started to do this in relationship to St. Philip the Deacon. So I think for time's sake, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to just let us know what's going to happen next. we as a design team have split ourselves into two groups to have two different research meetings simultaneously. You as a cohort are going to get the opportunity, you're going to get swept up into one of those research meetings, and your jobs are real. In research meetings, often we'll bring people who are really observers. Their job is to pay attention to the power dynamics at play and to be curious and learn. And then when we go to evaluate, to share what's working, what's not, what were the power dynamics in the room. So that is going to be, as a cohort, if you're not on the design team, that's going to be your role tonight. The first one of the research meetings is going to be with Andres Oswell, who was on Commissioner Udaley's staff, and he knows a lot about how the city works. And so we're going to go in dumb and come out smart with Andres around trying to fill in the gaps of our power map related to St. Philip the Deacon, and generally, like, we want to know how things move in the city so that we can be good organizers and move more affordable housing forward in our city. The second research meeting is going to be with Amy Beth Stevens, who works for Speaker Kotek. And this is going to be about starting to power map the state in relationship to HB 2008. And that is a House bill that we're going to learn more about its origin, which is pretty exciting, in that meeting. But it essentially does what we were able to win in the city of Portland, which is it includes affordable housing in what tax exempt faith communities can do on their land. Okay, but this would open that up in the state. And so we have interest as a coalition in being a part of a larger faith movement around this bill potentially. And so we want to learn more about it, the power landscape of the state, and where strategically we can work as faith communities in the state in partnership with Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon and other organizations to move this bill forward. So at this time, I'm going to have Josh. Are we good? This is the kind of spaceship part of this meeting where it's like, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this works. We're going to get swept into research meetings. The design team will take charge of that meeting in that space. And you, as the rest of the cohort, observe. What do you notice? How are we developing relationship well or not? How are we learning well or not? And what are the power dynamics at play? Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Did you have good research meetings? Good. It's good to see you all back together. So I am curious, we're going to do a little evaluation of the research meeting itself. Experiences that are not reflected on, I think about like undigested food. Like you can't get the nutrients, the energy from them, and they can't make life in the same way if they're not reflected on. So let's reflect together on this experience of having this research meeting. How are you feeling as you emerge from your research meeting? How are you feeling? Just plop that in the chat box. My internet is getting slow. Super stoked, Joan said. I love jazzed, clear, motivated, confident. Good. What else? There's more people in this room. Focused, engaged, focused, reminded of our power, momentum. Awesome. So good. So you can keep putting those feelings in the chat. Those are important. Remember how you walked in tonight and how you're feeling now, and what's that movement that's happening within you, right? From this to that. I was exhausted and anxious, and I am feeling connected and powerful after spending the last hour and some change with you all. I am curious, why are you feeling that way? Why are you feeling that way? Put that in the chat box next. Why are you feeling inspired? What happened that inspired you? Joan says, I moved to know that our elected representative is a person who cares personally about this issue. Thanks, Joan. Anna, I know more about the process, right? We've moved from ambiguity to some more clarity. That's really important. I feel focused because a clear path was put forward. Seeing power in us. I'm feeling that way because I see power in us. Clear roadmaps and good relationships inspire movement. Thanks, Michael. Guidance from people who know experience. Great, Christine. Brent says, I'm not alone. We're together. So how did that happen? How did that happen? What was powerful about this meeting? You're feeling one way because something happened. And how did it happen that way? We're trying to learn practices and ways of doing research meetings. What made these research meetings powerful? People care. So we discovered we're not alone. People shared their stories. What was powerful about the meeting? What really worked? What really developed relationship? And how did good learning happen? Storytelling over debate. Thank you, Brent. Focused questions. Yes. We learned because we listened. Yep. Saw connection between problem defined throughout, maybe? I'm not sure what that word is. We were lucky to bump into legislative partner who already cares about our issue. Joan, can you share about that? I don't know if we were lucky or if it maybe was strategic. I want to know more about the luck. You can unmute yourself.
Well, I think I'm probably I'm probably incorrect there, because Amy Beth was chosen to meet with us because you already know that she is an advocate working on this. So that's already revealing the homework that has been done before the meeting. Yeah.
Thanks, Joan. Well, in one way, there's something there. Speaker Kotek lives in one of the neighborhoods that our congregation is trying to build affordable housing. Our congregations, like one of our congregations that's trying to build affordable housing. And so she cared. So that's true. And she actually reached out to us to begin with and asked how she could help. We were strategic because last year we invited her to one of our cohort gatherings, and she witnessed what we could do in a room. And she was like, you all need to teach everybody else how to do this. This is how we're going to get stuff done. But we've stayed in contact with her and nurtured that relationship over time. So there is a little bit of luck. You don't always get the Speaker of the House in your neighborhood. But maybe, we all have people in our neighborhood. And so what happens when we cultivate relationships with our neighbors? Who might we get to know? Divine providence, Josh? Yeah, I'll throw some divine providence. My sick friends would say intuitive ease. We'll take all the intuitive ease we can get. There is a lot of good learning that's happening in this chat box. And so please read through the reflections, because as I look, I'm like, absolutely, y'all are catching it. This is how research meetings work powerfully. If we had we're going to talk about next steps. And that's also what we do in an evaluation of a research meeting. We'll be like, okay, what might be some next steps forward? I think we need to do some deeper debrief together as a design team and as a cohort around next strategic steps, particularly around the state piece and maybe around also the local piece with St. Philip the Deacon. But we are going to move forward, and I'm going to pass it off for next steps from, I believe Lauren is going to lead that. Am I right? Am I at the right point of the agenda? Okay.
Yes. I'm just like still so excited and inspired, having been in that room with Amy Beth and hearing about Speaker Kotek, and just a reminder of sometimes it's so easy to feel overwhelmed, but a reminder that we do possess a lot of collective power, and that it just feels great. So for next steps, get your pencils out, your calendars pulled up on your phones. Our next cohort gathering is Wednesday, March 24th at 6:30 p.m. here in Zoom. You'll get your Zoom link in your email. And if you're not getting the emails for some reason, definitely reach out, but all the information's on the Levin Community website as well. So write that down and plan to be there. As far as the work that you're doing with your core teams, we're in a season of having house meetings. And so, have your core team meeting with your house meeting hosts to continue to prep for your house meetings and implement them. Have those house meetings here in the next couple of months. And then sign up for research meetings as we announce them. There is an opportunity for a research meeting with Commissioner Dan Ryan. It will be happening Monday, April 5th from 2 to 3 p.m. If you are interested in participating in that, either as a asker of questions or an observer, contact Jules, who wasn't able to be here tonight, but her email is there and also available on the website. And then a potential action we have, and this is related to the work of St. Philip the Deacon and their problem. And as Amy Beth reminded us in our research meeting, what we have is we have people, and we have people who can write letters, and we have people who can show up at public hearings and testify. And so on March 3rd, that city council public hearing will be taking place. And we have the opportunity to submit written testimony to say, hey, we need you to change this zoning on this property now. We need you to vote now, and we can show up en masse. And so in the chat box, I think we're going to have the link to the Portland Maps website where you can submit written testimony. We'll also include it in the in an email to follow up tomorrow. You can watch the public hearing. It's going to be on YouTube on March 3rd. And you can also sign up to testify during that public hearing, and you'll have to sign up before by March 2nd at 4 p.m. But we can show up in mass, and we can use our collective power to help get this thing done for St. Philip the Deacon. So those are your next steps. And as always, we want to end our time together in evaluation. So
before you start the eval, we have an announcement to make also.
Oh, okay.
We learned in our research meeting that Commissioner Carmen Rubio is head of the Bureau, and she is, and so if you make sure you get a letter to her office. If anyone else, make sure it gets on all the commissioners, but make sure that she knows about this specifically, because she is the one who can move this forward. Okay, so just wanted to let you know that.
LaVeta, could we send out again the kind of template for how
Yes.
to like what
To
we
do
want
it.
to say in our testimony, and
Yes.
how to share a story? That would be
Yes.
helpful, I think.
Mhm.
So you don't have to, you'll know what to say. Yeah.
And just quickly, this is Maria. LaVeta, I do have a quick change to that template to emphasize that they actually need to make an emergency decision to approve immediately. That's something else we learned, that actually has to happen. So.
And LaVeta and Melissa, to piggyback on that, another hack for anytime you're working with Portland City Council is every week they have a time at the beginning of each Wednesday morning to hear from public testimony. You can sign up to testify about anything. And so let's say there wasn't a city council meeting schedule, you can still go to where the city council agenda is posted, find the email address for the city clerk, and email to ask to testify on any topic. And so if you're not getting through to offices, if you need something to happen quickly and people aren't responding to your emails, to your letters, It gets you directly in front of all of the city council commissioners. If you're making a specific ask saying, I need your office to follow up on this thing by this date, they will respond because you're in front of them in person.
Thank
So
you.
that's always a way to get in front of them.
Thanks, Andres. We'll add that to the list of next steps. Also, just let's give a big thank you to Andres and Amy Beth for being with us tonight. Thank you so much. Andres, you look like you're in your car. Thank you.
Of course, happy to be here.
Grateful, really grateful.
All right. Any other next steps or things that we need to be aware of? All right, everyone, all this information, it'll be included in a follow-up email in the coming days that I imagine LaVeta will send out. Thank you, LaVeta, for keeping us all organized and on top of things. So yeah, let's move along to our time of evaluation. So either by unmuting yourself or using the chat box, what was powerful about tonight? What worked well? What about this style of teaching went really well tonight? How were you moved? Positive feedback.
Well, as a principal who used to go around evaluating teachers, I would say that it was an extraordinary learning opportunity, because not only did you give us the outline of what was going to happen, then we got to be observers, almost participant observers if we so elected at that time. That's a very powerful teaching and learning tool.
That kinetic learning, I think, learning by doing. And that's being echoed in the chat box. Powerful to have actual research meetings, informative meeting, well organized and presented. Thank you. Pros showing us their best dance moves. Yeah, it was awesome to be able to have the two individuals that we had tonight. Getting to talk to someone with City Hall experience was great practice. We learn by doing, for sure. If you think of any other positive feedback, continue to add that. How about things that we can change? Things that maybe didn't go as well, or anything that we could have done better? What would have helped your learning? What would have solidified things better for you tonight? And please do snacks. I know, miss the snacks. Being in the same place together. It's just not the same. We do use this. We do use this feedback and take it into our planning for our upcoming gatherings. So yeah, please don't hesitate to add anything. Awesome to choose such a successful experience as our learning opportunity. Even longer breakout sessions. We'd like to do that, Brent, but Amy Beth was telling us sometimes these folks in power, they're having 15-minute meetings back to back to back, and we have to practice levity and being pithy, as Melissa would say. Anything else? Oh, Joan, I think you're trying to talk, but I see you. You're not unmuted.
Is this okay? Now I'm here, I think. Well, I just wanted to share that I feel as though what we're working on is one of those times where I wish I could think of the clever saying. It's kind of like we are working on an issue that has momentum throughout our city already for a variety of reasons. And we're presenting a very attractive and sort of no-brainer idea to be approved. The city council is already generally in support of affordable housing. So it seems like rather than convincing people that this is a good idea, most of our work needs to be done like on the details of what exactly technically needs to happen to get this thing voted in. Like, we could have the best idea in the world, but if the agenda is packed with so many things that we're number 16, I feel like we need to like get a hold of somebody that knows like the devil in the details of what it takes to push a vote through on a timeline.
And it sounds like there may be, because Joan, I think, was in our meeting, but maybe there was good learning that happened in the other meeting about how to make that happen. Am I intuiting that right, LaVeta? Do you want to
Yes.
speak to that just real briefly before we bless?
Yeah, we learned, as you said, the devil's in the details. So we learned that we need to make sure that BPS it makes sure that all the technicalities are attended to, so that when it goes to the commissioners, then they can vote on it without feeling like they have to send it back. So that part was very important.
And I will just say that I have sent an email to JP McNeil at BPS already saying, so it sounds like there's no technical problems. Will you please confirm that before I harass commissioners to do something they can't do? So that email is sent. That was a very helpful piece of information to ask the right kind of question. So.
All right. Well, I am going to pass it off to Janelli to close us in a blessing.
Not necessarily a blessing, but a story and something to leave you guys with. So before I start, I want us to think about all the research meetings and things that we have to do, things that have to get done within the next week in order to get the work that we are doing done and moving forward. So think about that, think about what we've been doing, think about things that we have to do. And so here's a story. When I was in college, my car broke down and I don't know how to fix cars. So the one day that my dad had off, he spent more than half the day working on the car. And I felt really bad about it. I told him, stop working on the car, stop, just spend time, just relax. And he said, el trabajo que hago es el tiempo y el cariño que te doy para que veas que sé lo que te está pasando y que te quiero y que te tengo cariño. And what that roughly translates to is, the work that I do is the time I show you that I see you, that I love you, and that I care about you. And so as we move forward in the work that we're doing, and we're thinking about everything that we have done, our to-do list, our research meetings, as we're strategizing, we're getting all up in our heads to remember that you're showing someone that you love them and you care for them and that you're seeing them. So thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.